Kerala Agricultural University, an NARF top-ranked university, is reputed on its farmer-friendly research of global standards. It is also known for its research, education and extension of international repute. Now we have Dr. Thomas Braun, who is the director of Max Planck Institute Germany, and he is doing his research on regenerative biology and Max Planck Institute, which has 38 Nobel laureates already. And now he is an erudite scholar of residence program of Kerala State Higher Education Council also. Now we have his presence in the Sanctum Sanctorum, that is our College of Agriculture, Vellaini. Along with him, we have Dr. Achyutshankar, who is heading Department of Bioinformatics of Kerala University. And he can be termed as the father of the development of bioinformatics in the state. I mean, we all are indebted to him for the growth in the trajectory of bioinformatics in the state. And Kerala Agriculture University is proud to have both of you, sir, in this Sanctum Sanctorum.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm really happy to be here in Kerala and really enjoy the hospitality. That was something that really find amazing. And I think, I mean, one needs to connect. Science is all about communication, to exchange views and also to bring people together who at the first glance don't seem to have so much in common. But usually that's not the case. If you dig a little bit deeper and if you look for principles, if you look for new ideas, I think if you just stay within your own realm all the time, I mean, then new ideas will not come forward. And to interact with people that are little bit outside of the group that I'm normally interacting with is extremely stimulating. So, and I also think, I mean, my own research, if you're asking for that, I mean, we are doing basic research, yeah. We're trying to identify new principles, but of course, if we find something that is exciting and promising, like stimulating endogenous heart regeneration, I think this will be something that will be picked up by other people, bring this to an application and really eventually then also help and improve health and cure disease patients.
Dr. Thomas, welcome once again to this very beautiful campus of the Kerala Agricultural University here in Trivandrum in the village called Vellaini. And the beautiful breeze, the canopy of the coconut trees. How do you feel to be in Kerala? I understand for the first time, a scientist from one of the top institutes in Germany. How does it feel to be in this?
I mean, it's an amazing feeling. I'm particularly impressed, I've mentioned that already, by the hospitality that I have the privilege to enjoy here. So, so many dedicated people. Also, I'm really impressed to see the devotion, the commitment of all the young students who obviously invested a lot of time and effort to prepare this meeting here. A lot of thought obviously went into that. This cultural evening yesterday, I think, gave me a very nice reflection that they also have just next to science, probably, and I hope for that at a slightly lower level. Primary commitment should be to science, but that they have a lot of interests and that they also live the Indian culture and then use that also as a type of motivation to drive their professional careers.
Talking about culture, I think, culture, one of the key words is aesthetics. And in science also, I think there is an aesthetics. If you do science without aesthetics, you raise ethical problems. What's your take on that? About the ethical issues that the new sciences, new biology, biotechnology, nanoscience, what do this bring on the table as far as ethics is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I'm slightly biased by this, what I sometimes feel is an over-regulation in Europe and in Germany. I mean, on the other hand, I'm convinced, that one has to think about consequences, and that also worst case scenarios have to be considered and discussed. On the other hand, if you over-regulate and just because you are afraid and because you cannot, and what is 100% in life, you cannot 100% exclude any negative outcomes. whether this should then be a reason to block types of research. This is also something that I dislike. So I think it's a more balanced approach. And actually, my daughter is pursuing a career as a bioethicist. She studied medicine, but her interest always was, what are the consequences of technology development? Are we moving forward too fast or too slow? I mean, in Germany, we have, for example, very strict regulation when it comes to embryo research, which sometimes to me feels absurd. So we are, for example, not allowed to do diagnosis on a pre-implantation embryo. So the pre-implantation diagnostics, where you remove one cell from the embryo, do diagnostics, and then implant. It's strictly forbidden. Once the embryo has implanted, then you can take a sample and then you can induce an abortion, which is, of course, much more stressful and painful for the mother. Doesn't make sense at all. But it's also part of the German history. This project, to breed a superior race 70, 80 years ago. And I mean, this history has ramifications. And just born from this idea, just forbid any technology that can be used for selection. Although, of course, you can also use abortion as a means of selection. So again, coming back, I think one should be concerned and one should do a thorough vetting of potential negative implications. But to block technology, I mean, in the end, it will anyway not work because other people who are less scrupulous will probably do it. But one should, I think, in a little bit more open way, embrace the opportunities and also then allow controlled ways of moving forward.
I think countries like Singapore, for example, they have a very differential kind of setting for these number of days on which, after which the embryo cannot be touched for research. And they seem to be attracting researchers from other countries where the regulations prevent them. So as you said, it happens anyway. Somebody might do.
I mean, it also depends strongly on the religious background. I mean, for Jews, actually, a baby is not a human being only after it's born. In Islam, for example, depends also whether these are Shiites or Sunnis. They have. This idea that God just installs the soul at a certain time point, which interestingly differs between Sunnis and Shiites. So until then, it's just essentially a mold of clay, so nothing human. Only after the soul has been installed by Allah, then it becomes a human being. So of course, very strong effects of depending on cultural background, religion.
I heard, my Chinese friends tell me that they reckon the age as 1 when the baby is born. Because 1 year, in the mother's womb, and then they come out, they start with 1. So, which is also like, as a computer scientist, I see some programming languages, they start counting from 0. But most human beings start counting from 1. So, something like that. So of course, ethical issues are a very major concern. A lot of political upheaval on ethical issues. Don't you think that there needs to be a constant kind of struggle between science and these regulators so that both do not go overboard? Is it not fair enough that there is a continuing controversy?
I think it's fair, and it actually also happens. I mean, views have changed, regulations have changed. I mean, just think about genetic engineering in general. When this was first introduced, I mean, these were actually scientists who initially asked for a kind of moratorium to explore first potential threats and dangers that might arise from genetic engineering. That was in the 1970s, right? The Asimov moratorium. So initiated by scientists, not by the regulators. But I mean, you cannot actually be too surprised about what politicians and some regulators don't know. That was also at this time when this moratorium was established. So the state parliament in Massachusetts, they had to decide about the regulation. And actually the policymakers, members of parliament, were asked by the scientists just in preparation for this bill, so where do you think in the human body the DNA is located? Actually, most of the politicians answered in the brain.
The brain.
In the brain. At least, I mean, there was some idea of what's going on, but I think that's also what we have to do as scientists. I mean, just also bring knowledge to the general population, make them aware of what's going on. That this is not some mystic stuff, but that there are clear facts that you have to
The public
process.
debate very many times may be uninformed. So I'm reminded of one politician who believed in principles of democracy, because he read it slightly differently. For the people, by the people, B-U-Y, by the people. So tell us something about your work. How close is modern science to regenerative process of heart and lungs? Something that very eagerly humanity is looking forward to.
I mean, there are actually amazing developments. I mean, I briefly mentioned that a colleague of mine is just doing the first clinical study of iPS cell-derived cardiomyocytes in a clinical study to be transplanted into human patients. So that study has just started 2 years ago. I'm not so sure whether that will be successful. That's another ethical consideration, actually. Usually with these innovative treatment regimens, you start that usually with terminal ill patients, where all the conventional means of treatment have already been exhausted. And that is, of course, not an ideal situation. So you might be well past a time point where you can still do something. But I mean, it's also understandable. I mean, there are established therapies, and first you want to use them and not something experimental. But that is not necessarily the best scenario to test new treatment options. But I'm convinced, I mean, I shouldn't be too optimistic. There have been a lot of these predictions here. We will cure cancer in 10 years, and it did not happen. But I'm reasonably sure that in 10, 20 years, we will see new therapies that improve the condition. I mean, whether this is really a full reversal, full regeneration, okay, but I think there will be some progress and some benefits.
So these are at animal studies level. Have they been tested out, or you only focus?
On animal levels, I mean, we usually use mice. We're also thinking about doing studies in larger animals. Although, well, I mean, the physiology of a pig is much closer to a human compared to mice. I mean, mice have actually a heartbeat of 600 beats per minute. So 10 times our rate. So
Striding pigs? Striding pigs?
No, mice. So therefore, pigs are much closer to humans. But I mean, in mice, we can indeed, I have to say, I mean, these are recent developments, but there it looks like we can cure myocardial infarction. But I also have to say, I mean, these are young, healthy mice that are subjected then to a blockade of the main coronary arteries. This is not the typical situation that you face in human patients. They usually have multiple diseases. They have diabetes, they have severe atherosclerosis, and then they have myocardial infarction. They're usually older. So this has to be taken into account. And whether our approach, and that's also something that we have to test, would also work with, let's say, a 2-year-old mouse who is also suffering from diabetes and have also vessel diseases. We haven't checked that. So these are also in the models that we have tested so far certain limitations. One, of course, always goes for the low-hanging fruits, for models where you can expect that things work most likely. But the next step is to make it harder and look also in situations where it's not so.
Speaking about models, as an engineer, I would like to know your take on how mathematical models can be helpful in life sciences. There is this project on the electronic cell where they're trying to model the cell as if it were like a machine, and how you model a motor or a turbine or an engine. And the very famous computer science professor called Donald Knuth, in his retirement interview, said that computer scientists have 500 years of work left in biology to be doing all these models.
Right.
So, are you aware of this process? Do you give it any kind of chance to
Yeah,
help us?
yeah. I mean, with this 500 years, that's probably a realistic projection. Actually, when we were still working with these Newton generation, I also actually wanted to hire a mathematician, yeah, for modeling of limb regeneration. But I mean, eventually, and that's, I think, really the major problem. So far, what we do in biology is usually not quantitative. Yeah? And also, if you look at the quantitative data from different labs, they vary significantly. And my understanding of mathematics is you need precise numbers. Yeah? You cannot use just vague determinants for your modeling, which also requires then quantitative biology. Yeah, and that is, I think, something that from the biology side we haven't reached yet. Yeah, these are more qualitative measurements that we are doing. There are no real established standards. Everyone does it in a slightly different way with different quantitative outcomes. I mean, I have a hard time to imagine how mathematics can cope with these problems. I mean, in engineering, it's much simpler. There are clear numbers, yeah, defined environment. By biology, I mean, there are thousands, millions of parameters, and you have to measure precisely each of them to do what I think is a proper modeling. So I think it will be difficult.
It's rangeless, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So possibly Donald Knuth had same take on this. That is why he said 500 years.
Minimum.
Yeah.
No,
Yesterday during our discussion in BioZone, I noted you thought it was people were just being over enthusiastic about the gut microbiome. And yeah. So I was from the context of the number of cells. I was yesterday also mentioning that by mass it's about 1/60th of the body.
Absolutely.
But by count of cells, 3 times the number of cells of the human body. So do you think that numbers imply that they have to be taken seriously, and their genetic makeup, genetic mutation, their genetic interaction with the human genome? And do you look at the human being as a whole system rather than a system of many organisms rather than just
Complex system.
A human being exists in an environment, whether it's an exogenous environment or whether this environment resides in our gut, in our intestine. Yeah? So, of course, there are a lot of interactions. And don't get me wrong, I'm not overly critical. I'm just seeing a lot of exaggerations there. Yeah, and I mean how metabolites from bacteria residing in our intestine influence our learning ability and influence virtually all functions in the body. I mean, I have a hard time to understand that. And also, if you look simply at this complexity of the microbiome, which is pretty different between individuals, yeah. I mean, how should that work? Yeah, if it's really such a simple deterministic relationship. I mean, then each individual microbiome should have completely different effects. So, and again, I'm rather critical. Actually, we are also doing such experiments, but I mean, the models that are used where you deplete microbiota completely from the intestine. I mean, this is, of course, an extremely artificial situation. This never happens in nature. So the whole mucosal immune system is completely untrained in such mice, which have never seen any bacteria. And then you infuse bacteria or transplant stool and see effects. Yeah, I mean, this is completely unphysiological. I mean, again, I don't deny there are very good, very solid data, but also a lot of exaggeration. So I had this example there with liver steatosis, so fatty liver. And of course, this has a, I mean, this is this typical situation here of post hoc propter hoc, so that, I mean, just by sequential events, you think there's a causality. So, I mean, of course, what you eat has an impact on your liver metabolism and might also induce fatty liver. And of course, also bacteria in the gut depend on what is taken in. Yeah, so of course there's a correlation, but that there's really a causality, and that the type of bacteria residing in our intestine is then causal, whether one person develops a liver steatosis and the other not. Yeah, I think this is
Okay.
people should.
I understand your argument.
Yeah.
Even given the kind of not purely established causality between the gut microbiome and human health, even given that it has some influence, I'm wondering that, for example, there is a talk about biodiversity and how it has to be preserved. I think inside that also comes the diversity of the gut microbiome.
True.
And how our food habits have affected it. When I was young, my mother makes yogurt. What do you call it in Germany? Yogurt?
Yogurt, yeah.
Here we call it curd.
Curd.
Maybe the consistency is different. She would make it by putting a spoon of the curd of the last day. In the night she would put and then pour some milk which is not hot.
Next day it will be
It
fermented.
ferments next day. So some days it goes wrong and then she says it didn't set well. Then it is completely thrown out, and then what she does is she asks me to go to my grandmother's house and bring the
Basic
seed.
stock. Basic
Yeah.
stock.
So today, so I look back, I see that we were actually having bacterial colonies which are very special for different homes. So today it all comes from one place where the milk in Kerala it is called the milma. So your bacterial diversity is actually compromised. So this is given even a small effect of the gut microbiome. Does this have implications? Our food habits. Or,
I'm pretty sure it has, but yogurt is actually an interesting example, yeah, because I mean, nowadays, I mean, this industrially produced yogurt, I mean, there aren't any living bacteria inside anymore, yeah. It's very different compared to traditional production where you indeed ingested, I mean, I don't know with this plant here in India, but in Europe and North America, I mean,
you mean it
there
is
is no, they're all dead. Yeah, so there are no active bacteria inside anymore. Yeah, which is So is that still real yogurt? But coming back to your question, no. I mean, also very interesting if you look consequences vegetarian food. Yeah, it's also quite interesting non-processed food. I mean, there are actually also a lot of stuff that is released from primarily plant-based food, which is actually pretty toxic. Yeah, so a lot of phenols, other toxic substances. I mean, it's usually then processed. Quantities, concentrations are not particularly high. Yeah? But I mean, people are just advocating, not because of ethical reasons, just to completely go for vegetarian food. I mean, of course, they don't know, or they ignore. Yeah? On the other hand, there are, of course, major problems with animal-based food, no question. Yeah, but of course, this will have an effect. Yeah, and
Which
I mean,
you recommend, sir?
I think, I mean, the human is a kind of an omnivore, just balanced diet. So I think whatever you feel comfortable with, you should eat. Not excessively. It's always bad advice, but in a balanced way. I think that's probably best. Overdoing. Actually, I had, when I was still working in a hospital, I had a patient who was a strict vegetarian for years, and then he also attracted malaria. Yeah, and then he ended up with a really severe vitamin B12 deficiency. And then he attracted a condition which is a result of this, the lack of vitamin B12, which is called funicular myelosis, which is a degeneration of some strands in the spinal cord, which is irreversible. Yeah, so get then paralyzed, and this wouldn't revert. Yeah. So I mean, this deficiency vitamin B12 due to this high turnover of erythrocytes, which was induced by malaria, then really gave the final push and resulted. So I mean, overdoing. I mean, just a little bit common sense.
Has to be
I
there.
think that that should be.
I also think if you take bacteria to be non-vegetarian consumption, then nobody can be vegetarian. You are taking
Yes.
some yogurt, or you are taking, in India you say this plant tulsi is very divine, but you take a leaf of it, it might also have microbes in it.
Yeah, I mean that's why we have acid in our stomach. Yeah, and there is this famous story of Pettenkofer, was a famous bacteriologist in the 19th century, and so I mean did a lot of good things, but he was not really convinced that the cause for cholera is Vibrio cholera. Yeah, and he drank a little bit of it. Yeah, but doses matters, of course. Yeah, and and he didn't get sick. Yeah, and that was his proof that Vibrio cholera is not the causing agent. Yeah, but I mean, you, of course, neutralize most of your bacteria in the stomach due to the very low pH, and doesn't do any harm. That I think happens with a lot of bacteria that we ingest. But well, if it's too much. Well, yeah, then they escape this first line of defense, and then they get into trouble.
So what you mean is common sense would reign supreme. On most of the things that would actually, you would be able to come to a wise decision on many of those things.
Yeah, but I mean, I dislike. I mean, yeah. But I mean, if you follow ideologies, and then become dogmatic, I think, particularly as a scientist, one should be a little bit more open-minded and. Consider pros and cons and make an educated decision.
So yesterday we also had this discussion about machine learning. To me, it looks as if the technology is now ready to learn anything, provided you give you sufficient amount of data. And data is the issue, and data is the oil, new oil, and you have a lot of ethical, just like research in embryo and all that, you have a lot of ethical issues with data. And how do you see this going into biology, new biology? I mean, there are very obviously useful things, but there are also going to be some prognostics which would actually be not good for the society. Before the child is born, you're able to analyze. In fact, in this city, there is a company which says you give a drop of blood of your baby, and we would say whether he or she would be able to learn 3 languages together. This is from the protocol. So now we are talking about the markers of learning, of your creative ability, maybe romantic ability, and I'm told there are dating sites which would say, donate your blood, and then we would kind of tell you whether you would match. This is new astrology, and
I think astrology. I think it is, and again, if we talked about that, I think this is another example of a tremendous exaggeration. It's, I mean, of course, you can sequence, obtain your genomic sequence from a drop of blood. But not everything is hard coded, and the information, whether you are a talented musician. I think this cannot be derived simply from primary sequence data, at least not right now. I don't know whether it's really as hard coded, but I mean at the moment that is of course science fiction. No, but I mean AI. I think for me it's a tool. Yeah. Like many other tools, a very powerful tool.
Do you see it going in the good way to support scientific research in your field?
I mean, again, there are a lot of promises, exaggerations. I mean, there's also, of course, this sense of a potential danger. I mean, but it also tells you something about the quality of research papers when some people are concerned that, machine learning program is writing your papers. Yeah, I mean, it tells you also something about the originality, and so yeah, I'm pretty sure that an AI can write a text, but I mean, my understanding of AI, and I'm amateur, yeah, but I mean, it's mostly based on statistical methods, right?
Patterns of,
Yeah.
text
So you
recognition.
have to train a machine so that it comes close to what it has been trained with. So, I mean, what happens if an AI has to deal with a situation it wasn't trained for? Yeah. So, really, something very far apart from the training data. Will it be able to make sense of that? Or would it just create some kind of random readout out of that? And so I mean, for image processing, yeah, also for crunching large data sets, organizing it, great, yeah. But I mean, really new principal findings, I have a hard time to imagine that AI is up to that level. Maybe, yeah, if one trains probably also a program that is meant to analyze images with classical literature, classical music, or the feelings that you have when sitting here. Maybe after such training sessions, it will be able. But with the current level, I have severe doubts.
I sometimes wonder, where is this heading to? You look at last 150 years or so, our industrial revolution. If you look at it positively, of course, it has given us all the kind of luxuries that we have. But I look at this person near my house. He has a BMW car, which is in Kerala very prestigious to have it, or you have to be very rich to have it. He drives the car in the morning, and then he stops near the park in the city, then he walks. You know? So
Otherwise, you won't walk.
all the luxury has denied his body of the minimal exercise that he should have. So I am wondering, 25 years down the line, scientists don't have to think, poets don't have to be creative because the poems are written by AI. You possibly give it a prompt. So then I suspect what would happen is that they would get up in the morning and do something very mechanical which they are not required to, but so that their brain keeps working. You like say the multiplication tables from 1 to 10 in the morning so that your brain gets some work. It looks as if we are working against the real well-being and happiness of the human beings. When you carry things too far, they should be tools, they should help us, but they should not rob us of the happiness that our thinking, for example, what science gives us, or even what arts gives us. That's the basic pleasure which has to emanate from you, has to go through you, has to be in your brain. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think, I mean, this has already happened in parts of our society. Yeah, I mean, you described such an example and might become even more extreme. On the other hand, I'm not totally pessimistic. I think human beings have curious minds, and I think eventually they will get bored. Yeah? If it's just a mechanical repetition of things and nothing new, I think a lot of people will become bored. But on the other hand, there are also large areas in our society where people are obviously happy with this boredom, yeah, and reproduce, have a very boring idea about entertainment, just do things that require the very least effort. Yeah, so, but so I think parts of the society will be affected by that. They will just indulge in this type of comfort where they don't have to think, where they don't have to move, they don't have to leave the bed. Yeah, but there will also others, I think, who will just keep the human flag up and.
Very happy to
Mechanical.
hear that. We need to be thinking positively, not merely looking at the negative
Yeah.
side of it. And I think that is what human beings are. Just taking a small diversion from what we have been talking about. I noticed that you have been with academic institutions as well. You are now heading the cutting edge research in Max Planck Institute. As a teacher, I mean, what is your take on teaching and in the modern time, and how you contrast your teaching happiness with the happiness in research and development?
Yeah, that's actually a difficult question, also slightly unfair question, since I mean I was teaching, because I probably will give you a disappointing answer, since I was teaching medical students in biochemistry. I think they all hated me. Yeah, they all hated me. Yeah, so since I mean medical students, I mean, usually most of them want to become doctors, yeah, and they don't see any sense to dig deeply into biochemistry.
It's a necessary evil for them. That's it.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of how can I use it later on. Yeah, I mean, I have a completely different opinion. I think that's what separates academic medicine from some healers who, I mean, just get some instructions from company representatives how to use drugs. I mean, they should really have used their own brain and understand. I mean, I agree. Most of this, what I taught, will have been forgotten in a couple of months. But at least, I mean, to have this basic feeling, the knowledge. I mean, what's behind all of that. Yeah. But that's why, I mean, I never really enjoyed. I mean, there were a few exceptions, I have to say. But teaching such students, yeah, I mean, that's now very different. I mean, when I do now teaching, it's mostly with graduates who have interest in the subject. And I mean, also for me, covering the whole breadth of basic biochemistry. I mean, some things I was interested in, other things I found also pretty boring. Yeah. And I had to teach all of it. Yeah, so.
Yeah, there's a program, artificial intelligence program called ELISA. This was in 1960s. It was a very mechanical program, not like ChatGPT. It was like looking at the words that the person who typed in, and then using that as a keyword, it mechanically said something back. But to the surprise of the programmer who wrote it, it was trying to do a psychological counseling. To the surprise of the programmer, a person who was sitting in front of it and was being counseled by the program, the person said, "I don't want to talk to you, I'll talk to the computer." And the reason was that this person had some issue going on with his mother. And after a few sentences, he typed, the computer located that the word mother was there. And it, after listening to him for a while, it gave a message to him, "Tell me more about your mother." So now what I would like to ask you is, tell me about your mother. Tell us about your mother.
Yeah, but no, but first something else. I think now as a teacher, yeah, and when you have only relatively few graduate students, and sometimes you are more a psychologist than as a supervisor.
You're
And
mentoring
to connect really to the needs and problems and of people. I think that is also next. I mean, to providing hard facts. I mean, which students can also pick up in textbooks. Yeah. But I think this is something to define priorities, also to motivate students. I think that's the prime objective a good teacher should have, and not just mechanically. This can also be done indeed by a computer program.
You say motivation is very important for a teacher.
Absolutely. If you're unable to raise motivation in your students' postdoctoral associates, I mean, then you are done. Yeah, and this is absolutely critical. I mean, experimental work is always frustrating. I mean, generally experiments don't work. Yeah, so and rarely they work. And I mean, for people to keep on going, this is tough, especially for beginners. Yeah, they think, I mean, they have a perfect setup, it should work. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, some parameters are wrong. You need to optimize. You cannot let it go until it works, or you come to the conclusion it's never going to work. But there's also a fine balance. Yeah, if people just stop before they have really tried hard, I mean, this is then your job as a supervisor to keep them on. Also to tell them, based on your experience, well, probably stop it. Yeah, it's not likely that you will succeed.
Perception that teachers are practical psychologists.
Yeah. More act like a guide than like a teacher. Right?
Yeah, but my mother, you asked me, was a very strong personality, very strong. I also, when I saw my father, I have to say, I mean, he died last year, 86. Yeah, but he lived also a full life. But I mean, I found this quite asymmetric relation. Yeah, she was really the strong person. Also, when I visit her, she's also 86 now. I mean, I have never actually seen that my mother admitted that she was wrong. Yeah, she has her mindset and she has her beliefs, and even if she is facing, I mean, clear evidence that she is wrong, she doesn't care. Yeah, so it's kind of an adverse conditioning, and never wanted to become like that. Yeah, but more. If I see evidence that I'm wrong, fine. I have no problems to admit I'm wrong. I have to correct myself. Yeah, but just stubbornly move forward. No.
It seems she was like a reference point for you, but it was a reference with which you kind of distanced as far as that approach is concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tell us also about a teacher who influenced you, and some memory about.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I was indeed influenced by a chemistry and biology teacher in gymnasiums or in high school. I mean, he was not really a trained teacher, interestingly. Yeah? So he did diplomas in biology and chemistry. Then obviously he didn't see a career in industry or in academics, so he decided to become a teacher. Yeah? But he had a different approach than these regular trained teachers. Yeah? So where I always had the feeling, it's trivial. I mean, his teaching was really based on facts. Yeah. He just explained well, and it was challenging. Some people, some of my comrades didn't like him particularly, but I liked, I mean, the clarity, how he developed a problem, and actually have to admit, I mean, he indeed influenced me.
Good. Sitting here, I come after a very tough day at my
Mm,
department in the Kerala University campus in Karivattam. Coming and sitting here, I've just unwound. This breeze of the Villaini Lake. This seeing so much open space,
mm,
seeing this greenery, and be in conversation with another very respectable
mm.
human being. It unwinds me. You are heading a very important research institute. I'm sure you have your cup full. How do you manage life and work balance?
Yeah, this is also another, and actually my wife also asked me, why do you do that to you? I mean, I think it's indeed a deep feeling of duty and keeping things floating. But sometimes I really wonder. I mean, all this. I mean, you're probably just referring to such situations. Yeah. I mean, you're constantly buggered with stuff that is either trivial or nonsense, and then they're addressing you. You should solve all of that. Yeah. And I mean, I actually went for this profession because I wanted to do research, yeah, and not deal with all these trivial things and with petty needs of individuals who obviously have no better things to do. Yeah, I mean, I somehow know, I learned, yeah, one has to deal with it. Also, keeping simply the people in your institute more or less happy. So if you ignore that, I mean, then can be really grave consequences. So it's this insight, yeah, that keeps me going for this particular part of the job. But it's nothing that I love particularly. Yeah, and it's also, I mean, the attitude. I mean, just one example, different situation probably here in India. But if you look at the number of people in our administration who are on sick leave, yeah, this is constantly between 20 and 30%.
Oh,
Yeah. If you look at scientists, it's usually zero. Yeah.
Ah, okay. That's interesting.
they're sick
And
in office.
Yeah.
yeah, even if they don't feel well, they come, of course, if they are seriously ill. But it just, yeah. I mean, I think they also, even if you work in areas where you probably don't get so much rewards back, but I mean, you have to identify a little bit with your institution. Yeah, you should be devoted to that. But I think I'm relatively soft person, yeah, and definitely not a harsh boss.
You
But
sound
if
very
I,
much soft.
Very soft.
but if I mean, of course, I can also sometimes become a little bit more determined. But if I just minimally raise the level of my voice, yeah, then I know if I talk to someone in administration, this person will be sick for 2 weeks. Yeah. Just as a kind of backlash. Or, I don't know. Yeah, so it's difficult. I mean, employees should of course be protected, and one should have educated, civilized a way to communicate. But I mean, they should also be able to receive constructive criticism and not just completely black out when that happens. So it's not always fun to head an institution.
So my final question is, I do understand that scientists of your caliber, your attainment, you're happy doing science, that I'm very sure of. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been doing science for so long. What else makes you happy? When you take a break from science, if at all, what makes you happy?
What makes me happy? I mean, reading a good book, also being with family. Yeah, things. I mean, sometimes. I mean, just doing simply nothing, sitting there with family members makes me actually quite happy.
Just
But
unwind and
also, yeah,
float.
just exactly. Yeah, but also, I mean, to read a good, stimulating book, nothing related to science at all. Yeah,
What
I
kind of
think
books do
that's.
you read? Is it fiction?
Yeah, it's literature,
Okay,
fiction. So not as I said, yeah, nothing really related with
science.
science.
Okay,
But more for unwinding. I think I read enough science-related articles. Although my feeling is I nowadays read more or less exclusively grants and papers that I have to review than things that really interest me because I don't have the time. Yeah, and just to browse a little bit more freely. I think that's it's actually also a consequence of this online reading, that you only read articles mostly nowadays of what you are interested in. I mean, I still recall, I mean, when you had an issue of, I don't know, Nature, Cell, major journals, I mean, you looked through that from the cover page till the end. And of course, you didn't read everything, but you just saw what's going on. And also sometimes read an article that was not just directly related to your field. But now, I mean, you can design your PubMed algorithms that you just receive a continuous feed of papers related to your field. But I'm not so sure whether this is a good thing. Yeah. And again, I think really new stuff comes from when you're also exposed to unexpected things, yeah, and not just being in a circle where everyone is just supporting theories, hypotheses, and it's closed, a bit of a closed shop that one should avoid.
I just would like to know your students or your researchers, will they primarily publish in English or in German?
No, it's exclusively in English.
English. And then do you face problems of their English ability in putting those papers together?
Oh, indeed, yeah. I mean, I have actually quite a few Chinese PhD students and postdocs. Some are reasonably good in English, but others, I think that's really not the major problem. So when I have to edit papers, I mean, it's also despite many years of training, and also despite the fact that I try to teach them how to do it correctly, and despite the fact that they have courses in their graduate program how to write a paper. But I mean, to develop a story, just logical succession, so figures, arranged in a logical way. I mean, if I get that, even if the English is bad, I mean, this is much easier than getting something which is completely scrambled up. And this still happens. And
I found that the science we could correct, but their English is very
it's
terrible to correct. If they, as you said, the logical sequence is lost and the language is like the tense is dancing, and then you have a very serious problem. Scientifically, the work might be good, but finally the story has to be
you
made.
have to communicate, and I mean people have to read it, and
Present it to the world.
no, I mean there are some of my students where I essentially completely write the paper new. I mean it's also pretty exasperating if you give it then back, and then they make corrections, and then again and again and again. That's sometimes real challenge. But it doesn't. I mean, I had actually also an Indian PhD student, pretty clever guy. Had also a couple of major publications. But his writing, I mean, when he was giving presentation, good English, but his writing, awful. I couldn't understand it. Because his presentations were
Good.
good. But
He speaks well, but
yeah,
doesn't write.
but the writing, it's also, I mean, simple sentences. I mean, you are not competing for the Nobel Prize in literature, So simple sentences, subject, verb, not so difficult, But if you have then sentences going over a page or so, and but I mean, it's simple, But nevertheless, I mean, to get people to follow such advices sometimes, I don't know what prevents them from doing it the proper way.
Presenting it.
In presentations, I mean, this is actually also much better than it used to be. The students are doing presentations now from a very early career stage on. And if I listen now to student presentations, they are so much better compared to 20, 30 years ago. So this has definitely improved.
Boys doing presentation?
I think they are doing really good job. And I mean, I was surprised, this self-confidence, how they present and speak. Found that really impressive.
What do you prefer, research or to be a clinician? You are a good doctor also. You like research or to be a clinician?
Well, I mean, I terminated my clinical career decades ago. I started off also doing hospital work, but I mean, I made a very active decision to leave clinical medicine. A couple of reasons. So one was that I felt after a short time more as an administrator, channeling patients into different directions, very repetitive work as well. Of course, I mean, there is this human level that you connect to patients, but I've found it also, maybe I simply don't have the talent for that, quite difficult to communicate with patients. So you invest a lot of effort explaining a condition, a disease, and in the end, you get this question, will I recover? And that after half an hour explaining the pros and cons, So I utterly dislike that. Another thing was that you are always in a hospital, determined by external events. You have very little freedom. You always have to respond instantly. There are nurses coming in. Your boss wants something. There are patients. So you're always responding. And you have very little freedom to do what you think is important. That was another aspect. And I thought in research that might be different. You have more freedom. And the other thing was actually also, at least at that time, but I think it hasn't really did not really become better. There was this hierarchy in the German health system. You have the chief physician, then you have the superior physician, and then you have the assistants, and very hierarchical system. And I mean, I think in science, if you interact also with very experienced senior people, I mean, it's a different level, and it's not like that simply based on your position, you can issue all types of simple crap, and people have to accept it. I give you one example. So I had actually a professor, pediatrics, and at that time I was working in the pediatrics hospital on the oncology ward. And I mean, he was not an expert in leukemias at all. And nevertheless, he was supposed to teach. And anyway, so he wanted to explain to us that T-cell leukemia is called T-cell leukemia because the leukemic cells infiltrate the hair follicles, which is utter bullshit. Sorry for the word. Nonsense. I mean, they have these tiny little protrusions, looking like hairs, and that's why it's called. But then I dared to say, Professor, are you sure that this is the correct interpretation? And then he really crushed me. So what? I'm here. So I mean, this type of attitude. You still find it among a couple of clinicians. Just being the boss. I mean, that entitles you to all kinds of. If I mean, doesn't if I make a mistake, I think there is a need to correct it, and I also ask always my people, I mean, if I do something wrong, if you have better knowledge, if you have better idea, you have to stand up, you have to tell me face to face, I have a better idea, it's crap what you are proposing there. And I think, I mean, this type of scientific exchange is absolutely instrumental. I mean, you can move forward in your own world, but eventually, I mean, this will lead to a disaster. You have to receive feedback. You have to also to stand up to critical questions. It will just sharpen your ideas.
So next, regarding the opportunities for our researchers in Germany, what's your opinion?
For researchers from India,
You were in Kerala.
I mean, I think Germany has also changed dramatically. I mean, just take here Professor Suni Pulamsetti. I mean, she started off as a graduate student in Germany. Now she has a full professorship. So I think the ranks are much more permeable compared to 20, 30 years ago. And if you're an outstanding scientist, I mean, you have all the opportunities. On the other hand, I also don't think that it's a good idea to exclusively promote kind of brain drain and suck up the local talents and then utilize them for our system. I mean, also there has to be an exchange, that people come back with new experiences. But I think there are a lot of opportunities, and if people want to stay in Germany for whatever reasons, I think they have all the chances.
What about the higher studies opportunities for students?
Again, I mean, there are many. We are looking for talented students, and also, unfortunately, I have to say, if I look at the working morale of German students, and I mean, if they already in job interviews ask about work-life balance and how many days of vacation they are getting, I wonder whether this is the right attitude. And it's something that also increasingly came up during the last 10, 15 years. They hear it, of course, from the whole society, but I think science is also passion. And if you're not passionate when doing science, if it's a 9-to-5 job, I think it's the wrong job for you. You have to go full in, of course, not 24/7. You need your breaks, of course. You need your vacation, but you have to have this passion. And this is something it's disappearing, and it's of course impact of the society, which has a strong emphasis on this work-life balance. Horrible word, actually, work-life balance. I mean, your work should be your life, So strange.
So, sir, I'll just conclude. We are very happy to have both of you whose specialty is your passion for science and your, I will rather say, addiction to science.
It's also sometimes a drug,
addiction to science and your the way you promote the science for the betterment of the society and all the effort that you took to come over here, interact with our people, interact with the sir, and his time he spent to come over to our campus to sit with you and for this message to our students, to our faculty, and to all our people. We are really thankful to you, sir.
Thank you. And again, it was a privilege and honor for me to receive this invitation. I really enjoy my time here.